government. And then so you had even Mark Warner, who is about as bipartisan as it gets in the Senate, saying this raised serious questions about the integrity of the Senate Intelligence Committee investigation, because it seemed to be prejudging the eventual outcome of that to
All right, let me
try to
just
knock
jump in
down
here, Ron.
this
Let's
order.
listen to the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, right now.
Sorry I'm late. All right. Last night, when I read the revelations regarding Attorney General Sessions' contact with the Russian ambassador and his decision to mislead Congress about those contacts, I felt a knot in the pit of my stomach. I worried about the future of our country with foreign influence in our elections. It goes to the very wellspring of our democracy. For weeks, I have said that Attorney General Sessions needs to recuse himself from any investigation into contacts between the President and his associates on the campaign and transition and Russia. For weeks, I made clear that I believe Attorney General Sessions' close relationship with the Trump campaign requires that he recuse himself from the executive branch investigation into ties between the Trump campaign and Russia. It's a matter of Department of Justice guidelines that I've read to you several times that are very clear. The guidelines are clear as day, yet Attorney General Sessions has demurred. The information reported last night makes it clear beyond the shadow of a doubt that Attorney General Sessions cannot possibly lead an investigation into Russian interference in our elections or come anywhere near it. With these revelations, he may very well become the subject of it. It would be of Alice and Wonderland quality if this administration were to sanction him to investigate himself. Recusal should have been given, but this goes beyond that. He had weeks, Attorney General Sessions had weeks to correct the record that he made before the Judiciary Committee, but he let the record stand. There cannot be even the scintilla of doubt about the impartiality and fairness of the Attorney General, the top law enforcement official of the land. After this, it's clear Attorney General Sessions does not meet that test. Because the Department of Justice should be above reproach for the good of the country, Attorney General Sessions should resign. But whatever one's views are on resignation, the most important thing we must do is ensure the integrity of the investigation. Has it already been compromised? What can we do to ensure it moves forward in a way that ultimately leads to the unvarnished truth? To that end, I am calling on three things. To that end, I am calling for three things today. First, the Justice Department must immediately appoint a special prosecutor. Given that Attorney General Sessions' impartiality is compromised, that responsibility will fall to the acting Deputy Attorney General, Dana Boente, who is a career civil servant, originally appointed U.S. Attorney by President Obama. It is incumbent upon the acting Deputy Attorney General to select as special prosecutor an individual who is beyond reproach, completely impartial, without any significant ties to either political party. The choice for special prosecutor will be scrutinized. Even the hint of partiality in that choice, even the hint that this person will not be able to get to the bottom of these troubling questions would be disqualifying. The prosecutor must be of great experience and unimpeachable impartiality. Now, this is not just common sense. This is what the Justice Department regulations require. They say that a special counsel should be appointed when a standard investigation, quote, these are the Justice Department's words, when a standard investigation would, quote, present a conflict of interest for the department or other extraordinary circumstances, and it would be in the public interest to appoint an outside special counsel. The regulations also require that a special counsel be a lawyer with a reputation for integrity and impartial decision-making. There cannot even be the shred of a connection between the Attorney General, Mr. Sessions, and this Department of Justice investigation into the events of 2016. Second, if the Justice Department drags its feet and refuses to appoint a special prosecutor or select someone with insufficient independence, there is another route. We will then urge Senator McConnell and Speaker Ryan to work with Democrats to create a new and improved version of the independent counsel law, which would give a 3-judge panel the authority to appoint an independent counsel. This was a law that was on the books, put in place after Watergate, to avoid a repeat of events like the Saturday Night Massacre. It was designed for this purpose. Unfortunately, it was not drafted with enough constraints. Congress allowed the authority to expire after Ken Starr's investigation into Whitewater went out of control. Ken Starr went too far. He tested the boundaries of the authority he was given. The law, the original independent counsel law, went too far. Sorry, the independent counsel law was not drafted tightly enough. But in this case, cognizant and wary of this history, we would work to craft a narrow authority with specific guidelines for this investigation to prevent this from becoming a political witch hunt. We hope that if the administration fails in its responsibility, that Senator McConnell and Speaker Ryan will rise to theirs. Finally, third, the Inspector General of the Department of Justice must immediately begin an investigation into the Attorney General's involvement in this matter thus far, to discover if the investigation has already been compromised. The Inspector General doesn't need any permission from either anyone in the administration or the Congress, and he should go forward immediately. We know the Attorney General met with the President several weeks ago. What did they discuss? Have there been other contacts between the President or senior administration officials and the Attorney General regarding this matter? Have there been any attempts to interfere with the investigation in any way? Has the AG or his close associates personally managed the work of career officials at the Department of Justice or FBI in the course of the investigation? The Inspector General has the ability, the right, and the obligation to find out answers to these questions and more. The revelations that we learned about last night are extremely troubling and raise even more questions about the President and his associates' contacts with Russia. Did the President know about the meetings between then Senator Sessions and the Russian ambassador? Were these the only 2 meetings between the now Attorney General and the Russian ambassador or other Russian officials? Did the Attorney General disclose these meetings during the FBI background check for his nomination? There has been revelation after revelation, mistruth after mistruth, stories shifting like quicksand. If there is truly no there, Why won't they tell the truth? The bottom line is we have an obligation to get to the truth. We must evaluate the scope of Russia's interference in our election and assess if agents of their government have penetrated to the highest level of our government. Nothing less than the sanctity of our dear democratic process, the primacy of rule of law, and the integrity of our executive branch is at stake. We now know the only way that this will happen is if an independent, impartial, special prosecutor who has no attachment to this administration conducts this investigation. If the administration is unwilling or unable to manage that, Congress should reinstitute the law, allowing us to bring in a special counsel to do it for them. Ready for your questions? Yes, just one.
Schumer, why isn't it enough for him to recuse himself? Why does he have to resign?
Look, the Attorney General is the chief law enforcement officer of the land, and already his integrity and independence has been questioned. It would be better for the country if he'd resign.
But is there something wrong?
The main point I am making here is we need an investigation to get to the bottom of this. Better for the country if he resigns, but let's get a real investigation going. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, is there something inappropriate about a senator meeting with the Russian ambassador?
There's nothing inappropriate with a senator meeting with the Russian ambassador. There is something very inappropriate to dramatically mislead Congress. He said he didn't remember afterwards, but it was in the record for weeks afterwards, and you can be sure he was thoroughly briefed for this hearing. It was obvious, with everything that was swirling about, that this question would come up. It's not a question of, you wonder about, I didn't remember.
Senator
Yes,
Schumer.
in the back.
Senator, if I could follow up on that. The question that Senator Franken asked Senator Sessions at the time has been replayed over and over on cable channels today. Was it not nebulous enough, do you think? Was it
Look.
was it crystal clear that the intention
No.
was, did you ever meet with Russians?
Look, there is enough doubt about whether Senator Sessions told the truth at his hearing to have an investigation of it. And the standard for remaining Attorney General, and certainly for conducting an investigation, is not just did you break the law. You have to be above reproach.
Senator
Yes.
Schumer.
During the 2016 campaign, Senators Manchin, McCaskill, other Senate Democrats have met with the Russian ambassador. How would you characterize that? Is that a level of concern for you?
No, there's nothing wrong with meeting with the Russian ambassador. The question that just keeps coming up again and again and again with this investigation is, if there was nothing wrong, why didn't you come clean and tell the whole truth?
Senator Schumer, do you think that Senator Sessions lied to Congress, committed perjury in his testimony?
Okay, I am not a legal expert on perjury, and I leave that to the experts. It was definitely extremely misleading, to say the least, as to what he did. And what bothers me just as much is every nominee goes through the record afterwards, and they make corrections. If the next day he would have said, I forgot, and here's what I said, it's a lot different than letting the record stand, especially with all the questions swirling about.
Would you be satisfied, though, if
next.
Dana
Go ahead.
Valenti?
The White House says that Jeff Sessions met with the ambassador in an official capacity as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. They say that's consistent with his testimony. Can it be interpreted that way?
I don't think that is the way most people would interpret it, and that's why we need to have a thorough investigation.
They also say it's a partisan
Yes.
attack. Is
They
that
say.
right?
Senator Schumer,
I didn't hear the other
Is that a
one.
partisan attack? That's what they're saying this is.
Is it what?
A partisan attack.
They say that about everything. It's getting tired. If they're interested in the truth and they're not worried about the truth, they know how to get to the bottom of it in a convincing way.
Senator Schumer, you are a member of the Gang of Eight, and several of your colleagues have gone in front of cameras in the last couple of days, and they have declared, we have seen no evidence that any of these contacts between the Russian campaign, or excuse me, the Russians and the Trump campaign ever happened. I'm wondering, have you seen any
I am
evidence?
not commenting on anything I heard as part of the Gang of Eight. Next question.
During the last cycle, Republicans in in the House wanted an investigation into whether Hillary Clinton lied before Congress, and they requested the FBI to get formally involved. And do you expect the FBI to get involved in this, and are you requesting the FBI to investigate the perjury allegation?
We'll wait. As I said, I think we need a special prosecutor to look into all of these allegations. That is the right way to go. I was heartened to hear now that a few Republicans have evidently called for this. And the longer they all delay, the worse it will be for the country and for them. Last question.
Senator, the Russians have pushed back against the characterization in some media reports that this Russian ambassador was somehow involved in recruiting spies. Do you have anything to say about that?
No, that's not the point. The point here is Jeff Sessions should have said he met with the ambassador when questioned about it. He could have then said what happened at the meeting. Nobody knows. No, because he's in a chain of command. First of all, will Sessions still be in charge of the Attorney General? We need a special prosecutor. This has to be above reproach. There's been allegation after allegation, question after question. A special prosecutor is what's called for, and if the administration has nothing to hide, they won't object. Thank you, everybody.
All right. That is the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, the leading Democrat in the Senate, calling for the Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, to resign. Short of that, he's calling for a number of other things, including a special prosecutor looking into the Trump campaign contacts with the Russians. Back with us right now, Ron Brownstein, CNN political analyst, senior editor of The Atlantic, Alex Burns, CNN political analyst and national political reporter for The New York Times, and constitutional law professor Gloria Brown-Marshall. And also we're joined by Sunlen Serfati, who's up on Capitol Hill, because we're about to hear from the House Minority Leader, Nancy Pelosi, in just a few moments. Alex, you're here with us. I want to start with you. Your take on what we just heard from Senator Schumer.
Look, I think you heard a very, very detailed sort of set of demands for how an investigation ought to proceed, according to Chuck Schumer. And he's trying to set the highest bar possible for what would really count as an independent inquiry, because the bet on the part of somebody like Chuck Schumer and Democrats in general, some skeptical Republicans, is that eventually the Trump administration will have to make some kind of concession, and they want to be able to say, whenever that concession comes, that it's probably not enough.
One of the things that Chuck Schumer said is that he pointed to the fact, he said he, Attorney General Sessions, may become the subject of this investigation. An important note, he called for a separate investigation of the Attorney General and potential ties to Russia, something completely different than the Attorney General's office is now investigating, to make it even more complex. Gloria, he also called for an independent counsel law to be reinstated by Congress, something that has expired. Why would that matter? What would that do?
The independent sense of it, the idea that this is an objective, neutral person, I think this has become very political already within these few days of Donald Trump being in office. I think there has to be a sense that this is not a witch hunt by the Democrats, that they're not upset by losing and going after everything that Donald Trump has put forward. So I think the independent and the independent investigator is what's so important here.
And Ron Brownstein, while we were listening to the senior Democrat in the Senate, the drumbeat continues among some Republicans to look into this. We heard from Darrell Issa, the California congressman who earlier had called for a special prosecutor. This morning put out a statement saying this only proves that we do, in fact, need a special prosecutor. Right now, I think he may be one of the only Republicans going that far. But still, when you hear recusal and then special prosecutor for Republicans, that is movement.
That is movement. He is in one of the most difficult districts for a Republican, one that Hillary Clinton carried, and he certainly faces a difficult 2018 map. And those would be the House members that you would expect to be most, amenable to that idea. Can I just underscore how, having covered the 1990s and the Bill Clinton administration, how extraordinary a moment it was for the Democratic leader in the Senate to call for reinstating the independent counsel law. I mean, it is a reminder that politics is situational, but it is also underscoring kind of the seriousness of where we are, because Democrats viewed that in the 1990s, when there were multiple independent prosecutor investigations at times, as really just kind of a politics by another means, kind of an extension, a new front of opening a case against an argument against Bill Clinton. So for a Democratic leader to call for reinstating that law is just, I think, also a marker of just where, how extraordinary a moment we are heading toward.
And Sunland, to you on Capitol Hill, we're about to hear from Nancy Pelosi, the House Minority Leader. I suspect she'll get the same question that Schumer got. Do you think the Attorney General lied? The question is, will she demur in a way that, interestingly, Schumer did, Leahy did to us, and Al Franken did, Senator Franken, this morning on New Day. None of them will say, yes, I think he lied. They use words like misleading or not honest. Interested in why you think that is and how you think Pelosi may respond.
Well, I think, Poppy, we will most likely see from Nancy Pelosi in just a few minutes when she speaks here at our press conference. Much of what she said in her statement last night and her tweets this morning, where she did indeed use the L word, lying, under oath when speaking about Jeff Sessions. She last night was one of the first out of the gate to call for his resignation. And this morning she really doubled down on those statements. She says, "We are far past recusal. Jeff Sessions lied under oath. Anything less than resignation or removal from office is unacceptable." And we know a bunch of Democrats, at least 4, following her lead, calling also for Jeff Sessions' resignation here, certainly in large part to also put pressure on Republicans here who, although they have called for his recusal, for him to recuse himself, they have not called for his resignation. After Nancy Pelosi speaks in the same room, we'll hear for the first time from Speaker of the House Paul Ryan. Our producer Deidre Walsh just caught up with him in the hallway, tried to ask him what he thinks about this. He did not answer, so we'll certainly be paying most attention to what Speaker Ryan says within the hour.
Look, and that's a big deal. I mean, that's a huge deal. The number 2 in the House, Kevin McCarthy, has said that he wants Jeff Sessions to recuse himself.
Yeah.
So, you know, it would be strange if Paul Ryan's in a different place right there. But we also have not heard Paul Ryan, as Speaker of the House, be critical of this administration. Heard a lot during the campaign, not so much since the inauguration. Manu Raju, you were in the room